Naked pregnant woman wearing a Bart Simpson full head mask. People who developed film, what's the most shocking thing you saw on a customer's camera? I worked at a camera store all through college and saw a little bit of everything. My favorites. 1. Biker rally photos are the craziest shit you will ever see. Like a bottle of whiskey in a metal hammock connected to a dude's scrotum rings as he walked around bare ass naked. And for anyone that thinks it's all hot girls that flash their boobs for a camera, it is not. Never get those images out of your head. 2. Crime scene photos for the local PD were rough. We didn't do many, mostly just when they needed photos immediately, but those are hard. The worst is when you can't tell what's going on in the negatives, and when the prints come out you realize you've been staring at the inside of a van after someone blew their head off with a shotgun. 3. Okay, now for the funniest. Sweet looking late 20s attractive woman brings in 4 rolls of film. She had on one of those teacher sweaters with the little schoolhouse, ABCs, 1 + 1 = 2, all that, so I assume she's an elementary school teacher. Didn't think anything of it. 4 rolls of this woman getting slammed in everything sexual position you can imagine by a dude that looked like he was 10 feet tall and hung like a moose. 2 hours later, Moose Cock himself walks in to pick up the photos. I realize after he leaves, the pics at the beginning they had their clothes on. The same clothes that they were wearing when they came into the store. Maybe it's a coincidence, or maybe these people had just got done with what could only have been a 6-hour fuck marathon and ran immediately to the camera store to develop the film. Didn't develop the film, but saw the picture on the index print of the film that came with the pictures. In our wedding in the days before digital cameras, we put one-way cameras, essentially just boxes with one film and a lens, on the guest table so they could take pictures of whatever they wanted. Quite a few funny pictures resulted. However, when we looked at the index print from the table where a cousin had been seated with her 2 young kids, 5 and 7, we saw one picture that hadn't been printed out individually, a picture of the boy's penis. The kids must have gone off somewhere with the camera and got up to no good. To this day, I wonder what the film developer thought about finding something like this in between the pictures of the bride, groom, and wedding guests, as the decision not to print it out or to throw out the print must have been a conscious one. This actually happened quite recently. An old lady came in with her late son's camera and a dozen discs that she wanted to check if there would be anything in them. The first couple of discs had some old albums on them, the next 6 or so were full of porn from the 90s. I didn't have the heart to tell this old lady who was over 80 years old that she was in possession of her late son's porn collection. She even gave me a tip for being helpful. When I was a photo tech for Walgreens, one of our regular customers sent in a print order through the website. The customer was 50-something, short and round, and half the pics in her order were collages of her gaping, lubed up butthole, cheeks spread wide apart. I worked for Walgreens for a while when the film was still a thing. Child porn came through more times than you would think. Obviously, you get stuff like shots of kids playing in the bathtub or in their bathing suits or whatever, that's fine. You can tell it's just for fun. CP always had these kids looking dead behind the eyes or upset. I thankfully never saw an actual assault, but just posed nude photos. But still, I was told this story secondhand. A friend of mine worked in a camera shop. When staff was bringing out a developed photo set, you would call out the customer's name to come up. Well, one day 2 people had the same name. He groaned, called it out, and this old woman came up and asked which was hers. My friend told her to take a look in set A, and if it is not hers to take set B. She says okay, opens it up and screams. He runs over and takes a look. The first photo was of an orgy in a forest. I wasn't the one who found it, I was one who was saved by it. My daycare worker and his girlfriend were sexually abusing me and my sister. They developed photos, back when you dropped off the film and picked up a pack of pics, and the person behind the desk saw the photos and called the police. She and I were both too small to say anything or testify, 2/3 years old, but those pictures put him in jail. A stranger literally changed my life. I still think about it and wish I knew their name to thank them. My ex-wife used to develop the film. Told me about a long-time customer that came in and dropped off a roll of film to be developed. The guy was an avid photographer and would have several rolls developed weekly. She called the police when several images of child porn became clear on this particular day. Police ask her to stall the guy when he comes in to pick up the pictures. She does so. Guy gets arrested and says something to the effect of that he usually developed those at home, and must have mixed up the roll of film with another one that he thought wasn't child porn when he brought it in. Seems he'd been doing this for years. Guy got hit with multiple felonies and got a very long prison sentence. My ex was a little traumatized by it. She told me she felt horrible that she wasn't able to stop him earlier. I mean, there was no way for her to have known, but she felt responsible somehow. I've been doing the job for about 3 years now. As long as it's not illegal, we will develop it. Never got anything that could be considered illegal, but we get nudity somewhat often. I'd say about half of it is 20% is really good on the eyes, 20% of I wish I didn't see that, and the last 10% being I really wish I didn't see that. But I'd say the most shocking thing is when a former mortician brought in 35mm slides to be scanned, and they were all crime scene and bodies on an autopsy table type photos of extremely gory things. Gunshot wounds, exposed insides, cut off heads, etc. I couldn't get through it and passed it off to my other lab guy. It didn't bother him as much, but he couldn't stare directly at the screen either. I can't remember what the exact excuse of why he needed them digitized, but I think it was something like educational purposes for others learning to be morticians. I was still kinda new at the time, and today I wouldn't accept that order. I would tell him to go to a crime lab instead. It was honestly one of the worst experiences in my life. I can't even handle gory movies. Worked for a few years in a shop that developed films and printed digital photos. Lots of disposables from school trips, etc., and a lot of the film was fairly normal. Digital prints were where the fun was. Aside from people who couldn't put files onto usable medium for printing, there were the people who had lots of photos on usable medium. I remember this one lady who wanted some wedding photo printing. Her son had given her an SD card with the photos on from his phone. Unfortunately, our machines loaded every image file it could find. Mother was not pleased to find her son's porn collection in the middle of a shop, with a young'un helping her load them up. I can't think of any others at the moment due to it being a few years ago now, but if I think of any more I'll share. I am an electronics repairer, mostly focused on phones. I also refurbish broken phones to resell them. It always surprises me how little people care about their privacy and personal data. I have received phones for repairing containing personal data of every kind I had to back up, notes with passwords, intimate photos, open bank accounts. When a phone for reselling has personal info, I usually just do a reset and forget about it. It doesn't feel moral to me to take a look at someone's private stuff. However, once, the woman who had sold me her phone contacted me. She explained to me she needed to recover the pictures, audio recordings, and videos on her phone at all costs. She seemed really concerned about it. When I was doing the backup into a USB stick, I took a peek and realized why she wanted that so badly. All that media were the evidence of her husband's violent domestic abuse. I cannot express with words how shocked and powerless I felt, up to the point of just bursting into tears. I couldn't get that out of my head for days. Worked at a warehouse club photo lab for a few years and we saw tons of weird, wild, and crazy shit. Never saw anything illegal, aside from pictures of a spray-painted cow, pretty sure that was animal abuse. It was store policy to print everything unless it was illegal and not ask questions. The wildest thing I ever saw was a group of people in their mid-50s all out on a fishing trip. After the fishing, they took pictures at a bar. Then a strip club. Then at a bonfire with a bunch of the strippers. Everyone was nude and it looked as though they were playing ring toss with a cowboy hat on the dudes' dicks. Oddest one I saw was a bunch of pictures of a gas station. Inside, outside, bathroom, freezer, pumps. The pics were all cropped horribly and needed color correction. We usually only did this by request, but I was bored so I just did it. When the Middle Eastern guy came to get them he had very poor English but explained that he was trying to send pictures to his wife and son in Iran. He came to the country to start a business so he could afford to bring them over. He drove 12-hour shifts for a taxi company in New York for 5 years to buy his first gas station and he wanted to surprise them and let them know they'd finally be together. I ended up giving him the pictures for free and asked if I could take a nice picture of him to send along with them as well. 2 months later he came back and introduced me to his family and invited me to dinner at his place. Been friends ever since. A friend of mine worked at Walgreens developing photos during high school. He said the best set of photos was of a child's birthday party, a few photos in the middle of the parents having sex and top-down views of a blow job, and then the continuation of the child's birthday party. A couple of years back when I was 18, I was a trainee at a small local photography shop. They developed films but also had those PC stations where you can print or develop your digital pictures. As I was just the trainee, I had an exhausting job to help the customers with the procedure because it's a bit confusing. Most of the time those were just elderly women who wanted to develop pictures from their last family gathering or vacation. But once it was a really creepy older man. At first, he seemed nice and polite and he looked like a well-kept elderly businessman. But after plugging in you could see all pictures saved on the medium, like an SCART or a USB stick. He wanted to select 2 innocent flower pictures or something and we had to look trough like 2,000 files. But well, he had an amateur erotic photo shoot or something like that because there were many low-quality pictures of him naked or half-naked, with masks or leather lingerie for men. I politely stood next to him and scrolled through the pictures for him because my boss advised me to do it that way, except the customer didn't want to. But he simply watched me with a creepy smile and didn't say something. I felt so uncomfortable and insecure and I never told my boss. Many years I got a job working for a large photo company. Part of my training was working in a photo lab while the shop I was to work in was being outfitted. Anyway, this particular lab kept a pocket album of interesting images. All I remember was boobs pressed against a glass sliding door. And the one that stuck out was of some guy sitting in a chair and he had a small studded collar around his cock. Another story. One of my sister's friend's boyfriend was a photographer but also had a job working in a photo lab developing and printing film. This particular place he worked for was about to get a contract to print photos for the Navy. As part of the process, the government's Secret Service, sorry not sure what it's called in N.Z., had decided to do a background check on him and followed him. He was unaware of this until things checked out and he received photos showing they had done this. Just to show that they had watched his every move, they included a picture of him picking his nose. I worked at a film processing factory for a summer before the digital camera age. People would send all kinds of shit in. Mostly pornographic pictures of themselves, gangbangs, dogging, etc. Lots of a couple of pictures and selfies. People used mirrors a lot. Thing is, sending back the printed pictures counts as distributing pornographic content, so we couldn't send most of them back. We did usually have a good gawp and award points for ingenuity. The weirdest / most uncomfortable stuff was pictures of dead babies at funerals. Mothers with last pictures of their dead infants and such. My ex used to work at CVS years back. She worked photos from time to time and one night she called me absolutely crying her eyes out. She said she developed some pictures that she couldn't even describe. I drove down there to comfort her and when I got there I saw some very graphic pictures of an older man molesting a very young girl, maybe 3 years old at most. My ex was in tears. I told her to call the cops, then call her boss. The cops showed up and took the evidence and tracked the guy down. Sicko got arrested and is still in prison. Back in the late 90s, I worked at the photo lab in Walmart. The company's policies on developing lewd photos meant I didn't see anything too over the top, but I did see something disturbing once. The first half of the film roll contained pictures of an elderly gentleman celebrating his 75th birthday, but then the pictures changed. The man from the birthday party was, and I'm not making this up, in a coffin. The whole last half of the roll was pictures of the man's funeral. A premature stillborn baby. The parents dressed it up in an onesie and beanie cap and took pics. Its eyelids hadn't even really formed yet and separated. I felt for the parents, but I couldn't handle that and I've seen some shit. It wasn't so much as shocking as it was weird. A woman would bring in a disposable camera full of pictures of her collection of fancy plates. Every week the same pictures of the same plates. No new ones added, none were ever missing. Always the same. Older guy regularly came in to have some photos developed from his cheap camera. The photos were all very badly taken pictures of an old CRT TV, the content displaying on the TV. Similar to people who don't know how to take screenshots, but worse. Half of the pictures / screenshots were random and I didn't know what to make of them, seemed like pictures of a soap opera. The other half was a bit more interesting as it consisted of porn. The dude literally took pictures of porn playing on TV and one of the pictures developed. I don't judge, but just get a porn mag and you'll have much better quality, naked women. It'll also be cheaper than developing all those photos. This happened late last year. The worst was while I was working at a Walmart photo lab and while reviewing images, came across those of a small kid absolutely covered in bruises, on their back, in their chest, limbs, face. It was awful. We have to escalate those through management so one of the store managers can call the police. It turned out that the father had taken those photos to submit for a court case against the child's mother who had let her boyfriend discipline him. It was so heartbreaking, but I was glad at least that appropriate legal action was being taken. The only other case was only shocking the first time. We only knew him as the pool guy. He obviously constructed/installed in-ground pools for a living and would often get photos of his in-progress work as well as before and after restoration/repair work. A policy that we had to follow at the time was that we review all photos that we print. Most people, I guess, including him, were used to only the first and last dozen photos of a large order being checked, but I knew the software pretty well, and instead of looking at each photo preview individually, could view thumbnails in dozens at a time, making the review process much faster. He got banned from the store despite many warnings after I found sexually explicit photos of him and various women snuck into the middle of his pool construction photos. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.